I wasn't always a spineless old man. Once upon a time before the family invasion, the house on Tree Lane in Los Altos had been my fortress. Now at 67, I've become a ghost in my own abode. I remember the day they showed up with their suitcases. My son Hamish looked guilty, his wife Verita looked determined, and her mother Ophelia looked at everything with the appraising gaze of a bird of prey. "Dad, it's just for a couple months until we find a suitable place to live," Hamish said then, nervously rubbing his watch band. It had been 3 years. 3 long years of slowly squeezing me out of my own life. My wife Doreen died 5 years ago of lung cancer. 42 years together, and here I was, alone in the four-bedroom house we'd bought back in the 80s. When my son offered to move in temporarily, I was glad. Hamish is 38. I thought his presence would brighten my loneliness. But I didn't take into account that he would be accompanied by two women who had decided to establish their own little matriarchy here. At first, everything was decent. I kept the master bedroom. They took the rooms on the second floor. I cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Verita on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Ophelia on weekends. Fridays were restaurant or delivery days. The system worked for the first 2 months. "Earl," Ophelia said to me at dinner one night, "your room is too big for one person. Believe needs space for a home office. Why don't you move into the guest room?" I almost choked on my broccoli. "This is my home, Ophelia. My bedroom." "Dad," Hamish interjected, avoiding looking me in the eye. "You only spend nights there anyway. And Verita works from home. She really needs her own space. You have 2 rooms upstairs. Use one as an office." "But Mom lives in the second one," Verita objected, pursing her lips. I gave up after a week of constant pressure. I moved my stuff into the guest bedroom on the first floor. If only because of the consideration that way, I wouldn't have to climb stairs with my arthritis. But this was only the first surrender of many. I spent 30 years as a building site inspector. I know the value of every nail in this house. I've remodeled kitchens, changed pipes, tiled bathrooms, and now I'm a tenant. No, worse, an unwanted relative. The kitchen was next. Verita made a habit of leaving her room with a sour look on her face when I fried bacon in the morning. "The smell of grease gets into my clothes, Earl," she complained. "And then there's all those greasy breakfasts at your age." So I started eating cereal and yogurt. Then they started locking the spice cabinet for safekeeping. My whiskey collection disappeared from the bar. You know alcohol is dangerous with your medication. After another 6 months, I was restricted from using the living room. "We need space for family time, Dad." Family time without the father of the family? Gradually, I started spending more and more time in my room. I bought a small fridge, an electric kettle, got my own TV. My territory narrowed down to 15 square meters in a house of 200. Hamish was always a soft kid. Even as a teenager, he wasn't rebellious or rude, just withdrawn. Doreen said he looked too much like me, but he was like her father. Sensitive, easily influenced. Veritas knew exactly who to choose. "I think we should talk about your financial situation," Hamish said to me about a year ago. We were sitting in the backyard, a rare moment when we were alone. Usually Verita or Ophelia were always around, watching our every conversation. "Why?" I wondered. "I'm fine with the money. Verita's worried. Says you sometimes forget to pay your bills on time." That was an outright lie. I've always paid on time, even set up automatic payments for most services. "All the bills are paid, Hamish." "Yeah, but, he hesitated. "Maybe you should turn over financial management to us. Just in case. We could help with investments, make your money more efficient." I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Or maybe I finally saw the real him. "My money is quite effective where it is now," I replied dryly. He didn't know that most of my savings had long ago been converted to gold and was lying in the safe of the country house. A house he didn't even know existed. Fortunately, I've always been a careful man. 20 years ago, I bought a small house in the mountains, 3 hours from Los Altos. I deeded it to an old friend, Toby Knox, who I served with back in the 70s. Legally, but under the radar. I'd go fishing there once in a while, saying I was going to a vacation home. After Doreen's death, he began to visit more often, filling the house with necessary things, long-lasting food, tools. My intuition told me that one day I would need shelter. Ophelia was the worst. A former elementary school teacher, she retained the habit of speaking to those around her as if they were misbehaving students. Every action I took was analyzed and criticized. "Earl, you forgot to take your pills at lunch again," she would proclaim, even though I remembered perfectly well that I had taken them. "Earl, that shirt doesn't go well with the pants. Earl, you breathe too loudly when you watch TV." Sometimes I found myself questioning my own sanity. Maybe I really did forget my pills. Maybe I really am too loud. But then I'd notice those glances between her and Verita, those subtle smiles of satisfaction when I conceded in another argument. Verita, a thin woman with sharp features, worked for an insurance company. She had the ability to talk about the cruelest things with a sweet smile. "We just want you to be comfortable, Earl," she said, forbidding me to use the garden tools. "It's so easy to get hurt at your age, and I've worked with my hands all my life. Even now, despite my arthritis, I could drive a nail more accurately than my son." The key to our war was the dog. I'd always wanted a dog after I retired. Doreen was against animals in the house. When she was gone, I thought, here's my chance. I found a wonderful 5-year-old Labrador named Baxter at the shelter. I brought him home tonight, hoping for a warm welcome. "What's this?" Verita stopped in the doorway as if she'd seen a wild animal. "This is Baxter," I smiled, stroking the dog's head. "My new friend." "A dog?" Ophelia appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands with a towel. "Verita's allergic to dog hair." "I've never heard of that allergy," I wondered. "It's a recent development," Ophelia said. "An animal doesn't belong here." Hamish, as usual, avoided looking me in the eye. "Dad, you should have discussed this with us first." Discuss? In my own house? I was starting to boil. "In our shared home," Verita corrected softly, but there was nothing soft in her eyes. I returned Baxter to the shelter the next day. The elderly woman at the front desk looked at me with poorly concealed contempt. "Some people have dogs as toys," she tossed back at me. I didn't bother to explain. That night was the first time I seriously considered leaving. Just disappear. But something held me back. Maybe the ridiculous hope that Hamish would come to his senses, or a stubborn unwillingness to give up my home without a fight. It all came to a head last week. I cooked my signature ribs and mashed potatoes, a rare occasion when I was allowed full use of the kitchen. I set the dining room table, even got some good wine from my stash in the garage. "It looks great," Hamish said, sitting down at the table. "It's been a long time since you've cooked, Dad." "That's because some people don't like the smell of cooking," I said. "Don't start," Verita pressed her lips together. "Let's just eat dinner." Dinner went on as usual. We discussed the weather, the news, the latest movie we'd seen on TV, almost like a normal family. I even allowed myself to relax and have a second glass of wine. And then I noticed Ophelia leaning over to Verita and whispering something in her ear. Verita nodded and in turn whispered something to Hamish. His face changed instantly, as if someone had turned off a light. Dad, he began in a strained voice. "We need to talk. We are talking." I cut off a piece of meat. "What's wrong?" "Verita was in your room today," he said in an accusing tone. "In my room? Why?" "Looking for spare batteries," Verita quickly put in. "And she found this." She pulled a vial of pills out of her pocket. My sleeping pills, the ones I took sometimes when the insomnia got really bad. "So? It's a doctor-prescribed medication." "You hid from us that you were taking powerful drugs." Hamish's voice sounded like he was reading an indictment. "It's dangerous at your age, especially with other drugs." "I consulted with a doctor." My voice sounded calm, though I was seething inside. "And I don't have to account for every pill." "That's not all," Ophelia stepped forward. "We found some strange notes in your desk drawer." "You went through my things?" Now I couldn't hide my indignation. "It's for your own good." Verita placed a few sheets of paper on the table. "What are these numbers?" "Some kind of codes. Addresses?" They were my records of the country house maintenance expenses, notes on needed repairs. Nothing criminal, but I preferred to keep that information to myself. "These are my personal notes." I tried to take the papers, but Hamish beat me to it. "We're worried about your condition, Dad," he said in a tone that made me sick. "You're becoming secretive, taking unknown drugs, writing down some ciphers." "That's enough." I got up from the table. "This is my house, my things, and I won't let you. You see?" Ophelia turned to Hamish. "Aggression. I told you so." "Dad." Hamish stood up too. We think you need help. Professional help. What? We found a good place, Verita said softly. A nursing home with medical care. They'll take better care of you than we can. I looked at the three of them and I saw strangers. Not family, was invaders. Out, I said quietly. What? Hamish blinked. Out from behind the table. Go to your rooms. I don't want to see you. There, Ophelia exclaimed triumphantly. An inadequate response. You can't send us to our rooms, Earl. We're not children. No, Dad. Hamish suddenly straightened up, half a head taller than me. You're the one who has to go. What? We think it's best if you stay in that place Veritas was talking about for a while, to assess your condition. You're kicking me out of my own house? I couldn't believe my ears. It's temporary, Veritas smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Just to make sure you're okay. And if you're okay, you can come back, Hamish added. But I could see he was lying. They hadn't expected me to leave so soon. I went up to my former bedroom, which was now Verita's home office, and got the spare keys to the country house and the deeds to it from a hiding place behind the baseboard. I went down to my room and packed the essentials into a small bag. Where are you going? Hamish blocked me in the hallway. You said yourself I had to leave. But we were thinking. We were going to take you to that place tomorrow. I don't need your help. I shoved him out of the way. I felt energized for the first time in a long time. You don't have to come with me. Dash, dash, Dad. Wait, Hamish shouted after me. But I was already closing the front door behind me. I got into my old Ford and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw the three of them come out onto the porch, confused, not knowing what was going on. They thought I would resist, beg, cling to the house. They didn't expect me to leave so easily. They didn't know I wasn't leaving forever. I'll be back, and when I do, they will regret their decision. The road to the mountains always calmed me down. With every climb, with every turn of the serpentine, I could feel the tension of the last few years gradually let go. 3 hours behind the wheel of my old Ford turned out to be just what I needed. Time alone with myself, when I could think and analyze without other people's evaluating glances. Strangely, I felt no grief at my son's betrayal, only muffled anger and growing determination. Perhaps the real pain would come later, when I was alone in the silence of my sanctuary, but right now I was filled with only one feeling. I had been right to prepare an alternate airfield. I remembered the day I'd first seen this house 23 years ago, in the spring of 2002. Toby Knox, my army buddy, and I were on a fishing trip and got lost on the mountain roads. While trying to find our way to the lake, we accidentally turned onto a roadway leading to an old ranch house. A 2-story wooden house with a porch, a barn, a well, a vegetable garden. It was neglected but in good condition. For sale, Toby nodded at the faded sign at the gate. I wonder how much they're asking. We called the number listed out of curiosity. The house belonged to an elderly couple who were moving to Florida to live with their children. The price was ridiculously low. The neighborhood was considered a backwater, 20 miles up a mountain road to the nearest town. Not the most attractive place for most buyers, but I was hooked. It's the perfect hideaway, I said to Toby over dinner at the local diner, a place to get away from the world. Why do you need a hideaway, Earl? He grinned. You have a nice house in Los Altos, a wife, a son. I don't know, I wondered. Just a feeling. Like someday I'll need a place that no one knows about. Toby looked at me curiously. You always were a careful guy, Earl. Even in Vietnam, always had a backup plan. Remember how you insisted we study an extra escape route before that Delta operation? And it saved our lives, I nodded. Right. Toby sipped his beer. All right, if you want to buy this house, buy it. But what's the headache? It's in terrible shape. I know construction, remember? I'll fix it up little by little. The next day we looked at the house again, and I decided to go for it. But there was a problem. I didn't want Doreen to know about the purchase. It wasn't that we had secrets from each other, but I knew she wouldn't understand my desire for a secret hideaway. She'd think it was bliss, a waste of money. Maybe she'd even think I was having an affair. I'll take title to it, Toby suggested. I'll be the nominal owner and you'll be the actual owner. We'll make a simple contract between us. So we did. I paid cash from my personal savings, which Doreen didn't know I had. A small stash I'd been saving for years for a rainy day. Toby signed an additional agreement that in the event of his death, the house would pass to me. It was legal, though not exactly standard. Over the next few years, I slowly put the house back in order. I came once a month, telling Doreen I was going fishing with friends. It wasn't a complete lie. I did go fishing at the local lake often, but I spent most of my time fixing up the house. I replaced the roof, refinished the floors, updated the plumbing and electrical. Gradually, the old house was transformed. After Doreen's death, I started coming here more often. This place became my real refuge from grief and loneliness. I moved things that were of special value to me: photo albums, books, a collection of old vinyl records. I installed solar panels and a rainwater harvesting system, making the house practically self-sufficient. He started a small vegetable garden, and most importantly, he built a hiding place under the floorboards in the bedroom, where he kept gold coins and cash. Paranoia? Maybe. But now it saved me. One last turn, and there it was. My real home. It looked even cozier in the twilight than I remembered. I turned off the engine and sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of nature. The chirping of cicadas, the rustling of leaves, the distant cry of a night bird. Not a single human sound for miles around. I got out of the car, stretching my stiff back, and breathed deeply of the mountain air. Here, unlike Los Altos, it still felt like fall. The cool nights, the smell of fallen leaves, the light fog that drifted over the ground. The house greeted me with the smell of wood and silence. I turned on the generator, then the lights. Everything was just as I'd left it last time. Clean, neat, everything in its place. I melted the fireplace, put the kettle on, and sat in the old rocking chair, watching the flames dancing. And that's when it hit me. Not just resentment or disappointment, the real, deep pain of betrayal. Hamish, my only son, kicked me out of my own home. The man I'd raised, the man I'd given everything I could. Love, time, care. With whom I built birdhouses, taught him to ride a bike, helped him with his homework, supported him in every endeavor. Ungrateful damn puppy, I whispered into the void. I wasn't crying. The tears were scorched with rage. I stood up, pulled a bottle of scotch from the cabinet, and splashed it into a glass. I took a big gulp, feeling the scalding liquid roll down my throat. Why hadn't I seen this before? The signs were everywhere. Hamish had always been a soft, pliable child. I'd put it down to his sensitive nature, but now I realized it was a weakness of character. His wife, Verita, saw that weakness and exploited it, and her mother, Ophelia. That woman had a grudge against me from the beginning. I vividly remembered our first conversation, when she had looked around the house like a potential buyer, not a temporary guest. "This house needs a woman's hand," she'd said then. "Men don't know how to make it cozy." I remained silent, though I could have said that Doreen and I had created that coziness together, and I'd kept it up beautifully since her death. But I didn't want to quarrel with the mother of my son's wife. That was the first concession. Others followed, each a small crack in the foundation of my own home. And here was the result. I was sitting in my secret hideaway, banished from the home I had built and maintained for decades. I took another sip of whiskey. No, this isn't going to work. I needed to act, not feel sorry for myself. I took out a notebook and a pen. The old habit of writing down my thoughts helped me to concentrate. The first thing I need to do is get legal protection. My house in Los Altos is in my name only, but they might try to challenge my rights, especially if they claim I'm incapacitated. The thought made me shudder, because that was exactly what they'd been implying at dinner. I reached for the phone, then stopped. No, not tonight. Today I needed to rest, to gather my thoughts. Tomorrow I'll contact Alistair Pierce, my lawyer for over 15 years. He's someone I can trust. The night passed restlessly. I woke up several times, tormented by disturbing dreams. In one, Hamish was a little boy, calling for me, and I couldn't reach him. In another, I was standing in front of my house in Los Altos, but the door wouldn't open no matter how much I knocked. In the morning, I brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I needed a plan, a clear, well-thought-out plan on how to regain control of the situation. The first point was to contact Alistair. I dialed his number, praying he hadn't changed it in recent months. "Alistair Pierce speaking," came a familiar dry voice. "Alistair, This is Earl Brody. I need your help. Earl, I haven't heard from you in a while. What's up? I summarized the situation, how my son and his wife and mother-in-law practically drove me out of my own house, how they tried to convince me I needed medical attention, how they finally kicked me out. It's not a pleasant story, Alistair said after a pause. But legally it's quite simple. You own the house, you can evict them at any time. But they can try to prove that I'm incapacitated, or that Hamish partly owns the house because he's my son. First of all, incompetence has to be proven in court, which is a long process that requires a lot of medical evidence. They don't have a single document that proves you have a medical problem. Secondly, Hamish has no rights to the house unless you named him in your will or made a gift. No, I didn't do any of those things. Then they have no legal grounds to stay in your house against your will. It's called trespassing. We can serve an eviction notice right now. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to act immediately, to throw them out on the street like they'd thrown me out. But the other part, the more calculating part, told me to proceed with caution. I want them to feel insecure, I said finally. Let them be nervous at first, not knowing where I am or what I'm planning. Then in a few days, we'll send official notification. Whatever you say, Alistair agreed. I'll prepare all the necessary documents. In how many days do you want to send them? 7 days, I decided. Exactly 1 week after I leave. Good. In the meantime, you need to think about more long-term measures, like updating your will. And maybe think about selling the house. Selling it? That thought had never occurred to me. It's just an option, said Alistair. I know. If you don't want to live in this house anymore, given all the unpleasant memories. I promised to think about it and said goodbye. The idea of selling the house seemed radical, but there was something about it. The house in Los Altos was now worth about $3 million, a sum that would provide me with a more than comfortable life for the rest of my days. I spent the next few days setting up my shelter and thinking about the situation. I had the feeling that I had to do more than just evict them. They must realize what they had done. They must feel what I felt: helplessness, fear, humiliation. On the third day, I drove to the nearest town, bought a new cell phone and SIM card, just in case they tried to trace my old number. I opened a new account at the local bank, transferred some money from my main account, not all of it, so as not to arouse suspicion if they somehow got access to information about my finances. On the fifth day, I called my old neighbor Walter Collins. We had never been close friends, but we maintained a good neighborly relationship, looking after each other's houses while we were away, sometimes working in the garden together. Walter, it's Earl Brody, I said when he picked up the phone. Earl, he sounded surprised. Oh, Noreen, your son told me you'd gone to a specialized center for, recreation. I gritted my teeth. That's a lie, Walter. They kicked me out of my own house. There was a pause. I thought something was wrong, he said at last. They've been acting strange. Some people came by yesterday, realtors, I think. They were looking at the house. The news hit me in the butt. Are they planning to sell the house already? So soon? Walter, can you do me a favor? I asked, trying to speak calmly. If you notice anything unusual, let me know. And don't tell them I called. Sure, Earl. I always thought there was something wrong with that wife of your son's. She's too, calculating. I thanked him and hung up. So they're getting ready to get rid of the house. They must have already made up some story about me being incapacitated or even dead. My rage rose with renewed vigor. That same day, I contacted Alistair. We have to move fast, I told him. They're already showing the house to realtors. It's illegal, Alistair said with professional indignation. I've prepared an eviction notice. I can send it tomorrow. Do it, I decided. And Alistair, I want you to find out what they're saying about me. If they're spreading lies about my condition, it could be grounds for a lawsuit. Good point. I'll send my assistant to watch the house and maybe talk to the neighbors. We discussed the details, and I could feel my revenge plan starting to take shape. Were they trying to paint me as a crazy old man, unworthy of living in my own house? Well, now they would find out what that old man was capable of. On the 7th day after my banishment, at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, a special courier delivered the official eviction notice to my house in Los Altos. Alistair had made sure the document was as formal and intimidating as possible, with seals, citations, and a clear statement that if I didn't comply within 30 days, legal action and the sheriff would follow. I imagined their faces when they received that notice. Hamish's shock, Verida's anger, Ophelia's panic. They thought they were rid of me, that I was helpless. They were wrong. That evening, I received a phone call from Alistair. "They've gotten the notice," he said, "and as I suspected, they contacted me immediately, claiming that you were incapacitated, that they were acting in your best interests, that the house actually belonged to the whole family." "And what did you tell them?" "That all of this would have to be proven in court, and in the meantime they had exactly 30 days to vacate the premises, and that any attempt to sell the house or change anything about it without your consent would be considered a criminal offense." I smiled. I was finally back in control of the situation. "There's something else," Alistair continued. "My assistant found out that they are really spreading rumors about your alleged dementia. They tell the neighbors that you suffer from age-related mental changes, that you sometimes become aggressive and don't remember who you are." This news should have made me angry, but instead I felt a strange satisfaction. They were trapping themselves. Every lie they told could now be used against them. "Alistair," I said after a pause, "I need something else. I want to record the rest of our conversation, and I want it to be legally binding." "No problem," he replied. "I'm turning the recording on right now. What do you want to state? I, Earl James Brodie, of sound mind and good judgment, declare that my son Hamish Brodie, his wife Verita Brodie, and her mother Ophelia Radley have thrown me out of my own home and are now spreading false information about my mental state. I demand their immediate eviction and reserve the right to sue for defamation and moral damages." "It's on the record," Alistair confirmed. "It will have weight in court, if it comes to that. But Earl, are you sure you want to go all the way? It's your son after all." I've been wondering, am I really ready to completely sever my relationship with my only son? The image of Hamish, the little boy who had once looked at me with adoration, flashed before my eyes. But it was immediately replaced by another image of a grown man who'd let his wife and mother-in-law kick his own father out of the house. "Yes," I said firmly, "I want to go all the way. They made their choice. Now it's my turn." I hung up the phone and went out onto the veranda. The night was clear, starry. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. I took a deep breath of the cool mountain air and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive and strong. My son's betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also freed me. From illusions, from false hope, from meaningless concessions. Now I knew what I had to do. I'd get my house back, and then I'd decide if I wanted to live in it at all. But it would be my decision, not theirs. Revenge was just beginning, and I was ready to go all the way. I spent the next 3 days strategically planning my revenge. It had to be cold, legal, and absolutely crushing. I made a list of all my assets: a house in Los Altos valued at about $3 million, an investment portfolio worth $800,000, a retirement account, gold and cash stored here in the mountain retreat. Fortunately, all of these assets were completely under my control. Hamish had never taken an interest in finances, and when he did, I had already secured the bulk of my fortune. Early in the morning, I drove to the nearby town of Pine Ridge, where I found a small cafe with Wi-Fi. After ordering a coffee, I opened my laptop and began preparing my main weapon, documenting my ownership of the house and land in Los Altos. "Good morning, Alistair," I said when the lawyer answered the phone. "Earl, how are you? Any news? I'm ready to act. I need to prepare a full eviction package and protect my property. I've already started the work, but we're going to need the original deeds to the house. Do you have access to them?" "I've been thinking. All the important papers were kept in a safe in my office, now Verida's home office. But there was also a spare set that I had thoughtfully stashed here in the mountain house. Yes, I have copies. I can send you the scans right away." I spent the next hour scanning and sending documents, title deeds, insurance policies, tax receipts for the last 5 years, utility bills in my name. Everything confirmed that I was the only legal owner of the house in Los Altos. "Great," Alistair said, reviewing the materials. "With that, we can prepare a formal eviction notice. You'll need to sign it. I'll drive up to your office tonight." "Earl, are you sure? It's over 3 hours away." "Absolutely. I want this done right." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was on my way to San Jose, where Alistair's office was located. The drive gave me time to consider the next steps. The eviction notice was only the first move. I wanted them to feel what I felt: helplessness, fear, humiliation. Alistair's office was in a modern glass and concrete building. His secretary, Lisa, greeted me with surprise. "Mr. Brody, we haven't seen you in, it seems like over a year." "Hello, Lisa." "Yes, I've been busy." Alistair greeted me with a handshake and led me into his office. I'd been here dozens of times in the 20 years I'd been working here, but today seemed different. I wasn't just a client coming in to discuss a will or investments. I was a man declaring war on his own family. "Here are the papers." Alistair spread the papers out on the table. An official eviction notice, a demand to vacate the premises within 30 days, a warning of the consequences of noncompliance. I read each document carefully. The legal language was dry and unemotional, but behind it was my pain and my determination to get justice. "It looks right," I said, signing the last page. "When will they get the notice?" "I'll send it by courier tomorrow morning. They should receive it by about 10 o'clock in the morning." I nodded. 7 days after my banishment. Symbolic. "What's next?" I asked. "What if they ignore the notice?" "Then we file a lawsuit for forced eviction. The court will schedule a hearing, usually within 2 weeks. Given your spotless paperwork and the fact that they have no claim to the property, the ruling will be in your favor. After that, the sheriff can physically evict them if they refuse to leave voluntarily." "And what about their claims of my incapacity?" Alistair took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It's a serious accusation, but the burden of proof is on them. They'll need a doctor's report, preferably a psychiatrist, to prove that you're incapable of making decisions." "Do they have such a report?" "Of course not. I've never been to a psychiatrist." "Then they'd have to convince the court to order a medical examination first. That's a separate procedure that takes time. Until it's completed, you're still the rightful owner with all rights." I wondered. Alistair had stated the obvious, but I was worried that they might find some unscrupulous doctor who would write the report they wanted for money. "There's something else," I said. "I have reason to believe that they might try to sell the house." Alistair's eyebrows rose. "Without your signature?" "That's a felony, Earl. My signature could be forged. Or they could claim that I signed the documents earlier, before my condition deteriorated." Alistair tapped his fingers on the table. "In that case, we should take additional measures. I can send a notice to all the real estate agencies in the area, informing them that the house is not for sale, and any sale documents without your personal presence and notarization are forgeries." "Do that," I nodded. "And one more thing. I need to change my will. Up until now, my will had been simple. All my property went to Hamish. Now the thought disgusted me. I want to exclude Hamish from the will completely. All my assets should go to a veterans charity." Alistair was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's your right. I will prepare a new will for your next visit." On the way back to the mountains, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if with every decision I made, with every document I signed, I was regaining control of my life. It was already dark by the time I got back to my house. I put the car in the garage, went inside and turned on the lights. Something was wrong. I felt it immediately. The slight shifting of things, the faint odor of someone else's presence. Someone had been in the house while I was gone. I walked cautiously through the rooms, checking every corner. No one. But there was an envelope on the kitchen table that definitely hadn't been there this morning. I opened it with shaky hands. Inside was a short note. "I knew you were here, old man. They'll know soon enough, too. H. Hamish." He knew about the house. But how? I never told him about this place. Never took him here. The only person who knew was, Toby Knox, an old friend of mine whose name was on the deed to the house. Did he really tell Hamish? But why? I grabbed my phone and dialed Toby's number. It went on, and finally his voice. Dash, dash. "Hello? Toby, it's Earl. Did you tell Hamish about the mountain house?" A pause, too long to be innocent. "Earl, he came to see me a month ago. Said he was worried about you, that you were forgetful and weird. Asked if you had any other assets they didn't know about. And you just went ahead and told him? He's your son, Earl. I thought he was really worried. He seemed sincere. I felt my insides boiling. You betrayed me, Toby. 20 years of friendship, and you betrayed me at my son's first request. Earl, I didn't think. You didn't. You weren't thinking. I hung up and threw the phone on the couch. The house was no longer a safe haven. Hamish knew about it, probably even had a key. We had to act fast. I called a locksmith from Pine Ridge in the morning, and by lunchtime, all the locks in the house had been changed. I installed a simple but effective alarm system, an old military habit of always having a backup plan. Now at least I would know if someone tried to enter. That same evening, I called Alistair. The situation has changed, I told him. Hamish knows about my hideout. He's already been here. Left a note. That complicates matters, Alistair said thoughtfully. But it doesn't change the legal side. The house in Los Altos is still yours, and you have every right to evict them. But they can try to find me here, and possibly start proceedings to have me declared incompetent. All the more reason to act quickly and decisively. The eviction notice will be delivered tomorrow as we plan, and I'll start preparing additional documents to protect your interests in case they try to challenge your legal capacity. I spent a restless night, waking up to every rustle. In the morning, I checked all the windows and doors, then sat at my computer, nervously refreshing my email every few minutes. Alistair had promised to let me know when the notice was delivered. The email arrived at 10:30 in the morning. Notice delivered and received by Verita Brody. The courier reports that she seems shocked. We'll keep you informed of further developments. A P. I lean back in my chair, visualizing the scene in the house. Verita opens the door, accepts the envelope, and reads the official eviction notice. Her face changes from smugness to shock, then to panic. She calls out to Hamish and Ophelia. The three of them reread the document, unable to believe their eyes. It was a sweet fantasy, but I wanted to know what was really going on. I called my neighbor Walter again. Walter, it's Earl again. Any news? Oh, Earl! Walter's voice sounded excited. You're not going to believe this. A police car just pulled up to your house. Your son and his wife are arguing with the officers on the porch. The police? I didn't see that coming. Yeah, 2 officers. They're showing some papers. Oh, looks like they're leaving. No, your son's holding one of their hands. He looks very upset. I asked Walter to keep me informed and hung up. Then I immediately called Alistair. The police are there, I said without preamble. Do you know anything about it? The police? Alistair seemed surprised. No, I didn't call the police. Perhaps they went to the station themselves. Why? I can only speculate. Maybe they've reported you missing or are trying to accuse you of something. Either way, it doesn't change our plans. The notice has been delivered, the 30-day countdown has begun. I couldn't sit still waiting for the news. I decided to take a walk around the house, check out the grounds. The fresh mountain air cleared my thoughts a bit. I always knew Hamish wouldn't give up easily. He might have seemed soft, but there was a hidden, stubborn streak in him, perhaps inherited from me. Back at the house, I found 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail message. I pressed play. Dad, this is Hamish. I know what you're listening to, what you're doing. It's wrong. We tried to help you and you're kicking us out? We don't have another place to live. Verita's pregnant. Did you know that? You're going to throw a pregnant woman out on the street? Call me back. We need to talk. I listened to the message twice, trying to catch the falseness in my son's voice. Pregnant? That's the first time I'd heard that. It could have been true or it could have been a lie designed to make me feel guilty. Either way, it didn't change my mind. By late afternoon, the phone was ringing off the hook. Hamish, unknown numbers, even one call from Ophelia. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I contacted Alistair. They're trying to contact me, I told him, claiming that Verita is pregnant. That's an interesting move, Alistair hummed. But even if it's true, it doesn't give them a right to your property. What about the police? Well, my assistant found out that they have indeed filed a report about your disappearance, claiming you're suffering from dementia and left home to an unknown destination. The police have taken a report, but don't seem too concerned, considering you're a capable adult, and the eviction notice clearly shows you're sane. I shook my head. They hadn't given up trying to paint me as a crazy old man. What should I do? Should I show up at the police station? Show that I'm okay? I don't think that's necessary, Alistair answered. It's better to keep a low profile for the moment. I can contact the police on your behalf, explain the situation. It will be more effective than if you show up on their radar yourself. I agreed with his reasoning. The fewer people who knew of my whereabouts, the better. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. The phone calls continued, but I didn't answer. I checked my email every hour, waiting for news from Alistair. On the third day after the notice was delivered, he finally wrote, "They have contacted me through a solicitor. One Gerald Price specializes in family law. They're offering a compromise. They'll vacate the house within 3 months, not 30 days, and find a new place to live during that time. In return, you withdraw the eviction notice and take no legal action against them." What do you say? I hesitated. 3 months instead of one. In that time, they could do significant damage to the house or, worse, find a way to challenge my claim to it. No, I wasn't going to give them that kind of head start. No compromise, I wrote back. 30 days as stated in the notice. If they don't vacate the house by that date, we will file a lawsuit for forced eviction. Alistair's reply came an hour later. Understood. I'll pass your position on to them. Be prepared for the possibility that they may move to more aggressive tactics. I was ready. The next morning, Walter reported that he saw Hamish carrying boxes out of the house and loading them into the car. Had they started packing? Or was it just a play for the neighbors? The answer came later that evening when Alistair forwarded me an email from Hamish and Verida's lawyer. In it, they formally disputed my mental state and demanded a medical evaluation before any further eviction action. It's a standard delaying tactic, Alistair commented. They're trying to buy time. But without real evidence of your incapacity, the court is unlikely to grant their request. I wasn't so sure. Hamish knew me better than anyone, knew my habits, my weaknesses. What if he found a way to paint me as unstable? I spent the next few days thinking of countermeasures. I had to be proactive. I contacted my longtime physician, Dr. Newman, and arranged for a full medical examination, including a cognitive evaluation. The results were predictable. I was in excellent physical and mental condition for my age. Dr. Newman gave me an official report, which I immediately forwarded to Alistair. "That's a great move," he approved. "Now we have an up-to-date medical report to refute their claims." But Hamish didn't give up. Through Walter, I learned that a man in a suit, presumably a private detective, came to the house. He questioned the neighbors about me, about my behavior in recent months, looking for evidence of my instability. On the 5th day after the eviction notice, Alistair called with the news. "They've filed a formal objection to the eviction," he reported. "The court has scheduled a preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. Until then, everything stays as it is." So they've won 2 extra weeks? Technically, yes. But it doesn't change the end result. They still have no rights to the house. I sigh. The legal delays were expected, but still frustrating. I wanted a quick and decisive result. "There's something else," Alistair continued. "My assistant found out that they were indeed looking for a new place to live. Hamish was in contact with several real estate agencies and was considering renting. That news reassured me a little. So they realized they were going to lose and were preparing for the inevitable eviction. But my peace of mind was short-lived. The next day came a text from Walter. A car with the logo of a real estate appraisal company was coming to the house. Were they still planning to sell the house? It was impossible without my consent. I informed Alistair immediately. "I'll take care of it," he assured me. "I will send a formal warning to the company that the house is not for sale and that any valuation or sale without your consent is illegal." By the 7th day after the notice, the situation had escalated to a fever pitch. Hamish left me a voicemail message full of despair and anger. "Dad, you are destroying our family. We tried to help you and you respond with this? Verita cries every night. Mom is sick from the stress. Are you really that cruel? If you don't rescind your eviction notice, I'll publish your old letters, the ones where you wrote about your fantasies and your fears. Everyone will know that you've always been a little bit crazy. Think about it. Blackmail." I didn't expect Hamish to stoop to that. The letters he was referring to were my personal notes I'd kept during a particularly difficult period after Doreen's death. Yes, there were some dark thoughts in there, but nothing that indicated mental illness. just the grief of a man who had lost his beloved wife. I forwarded the message to Alistair with a short comment. They've moved on to blackmail. His response was immediate. Save this message. It could be seen as an attempted extortion and will only strengthen our position in court. That evening, exactly 1 week after the eviction notice was delivered, I received an email with a picture. It showed the front door of my home in Los Altos with a large white piece of paper attached to it. In large letters it said, "Warning, a missing elderly person with dementia lives in this house. If you have seen Earl Brody, please notify the police." They put it up in front of all the neighbors, all the passers-by. They publicly declared me crazy. I could feel the blood rushing to my face with rage. It was the last straw. They wanted a war. They would get it. I picked up the phone and dialed Alistair's number. "I've seen the picture," he said, not waiting for me to say anything. "This is out of line. I want them evicted immediately. Not in 30 days, not after the court hearing. Now, Earl, there are procedures." "To hell with procedures. They're trying to destroy my reputation, make me look crazy. Who knows what else they'll do?" Alistair was silent for a moment, then said, "There is one way to speed up the process. We can file an emergency application claiming that they are causing irreparable damage to your property and reputation. The court can consider it within a few days. Do it." I hung up the phone and sat on the veranda, looking out at the sunset. 7 days ago, I left my home, kicked out by my own son. Today, I declared a full-scale war to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The circle had closed. I knew there were more battles to come. Hamish and Verita wouldn't give up easily, but I was ready to go all the way. They wanted to see the real Earl Brody. Well, they would see him, and they'd regret the day they decided to kick me out of my own house. The next few days became a strange war of nerves. I didn't answer the phone, but I listened intently to every voicemail that Hamish, Verita, and Ophelia left. Their tone changed from message to message, from angry accusations to pitiful pleas, and back again. This emotional merry-go-round let me know that they were gradually realizing the seriousness of the situation. Particularly telling was a message left by Hamish on the second day after receiving the notice. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You can't evict your own family. We've been living here for 3 years. We have rights." I talked to a lawyer and he said that such notices are not valid in the case of immediate family members. "Call me back. Stop hiding." I forwarded the recording to Alistair, who replied with a short message. "Absolute nonsense. No special rights for relatives unless they are co-owners. They are just desperately bluffing." On the third day, Hamish's tone changed. "Dad, listen. We can work this out amicably. Let's get together. Talk like adults. I realize you may have misinterpreted our intentions. We were really concerned about your health, but we may have overreacted. Please call us back." A message came from Verita, too, the first in a while. "Earl, it's Verita. I know you're angry, and you have a right to be. But please think about Hamish. He's your only son. And, I'm pregnant, Earl. Your grandson or granddaughter will be born in 6 months. Do you really want us to raise your grandson without a roof over his head?" I doubted the veracity of her words about the pregnancy. In the 3 years they'd lived together in my house, they'd never talked about children. Verita had always seemed too career-focused for motherhood. And suddenly, magically, she's pregnant just when they're facing eviction? Too convenient a coincidence. I called Alistair to discuss Verita's new tactic. "It's pretty gross manipulation," he agreed. "But even if she really is pregnant, it doesn't affect the legal side of things. They still have to vacate the house within the specified time frame." "I'd like you to give them an official message on my behalf," I said. "No negotiations, no concessions. 30 days, not a day more." "I will," Alistair promised. "Although I must warn you that their lawyer has already contacted me. They're trying to delay the process." In the following days, I received regular reports from my neighbor, Walter. He was my eyes and ears in Los Altos, and his observations proved invaluable. "They made quite a scene yesterday, Earl," he reported by phone on the 4th day. "They were yelling so loud you could hear it from across the street. That old woman, Verita's mother, was trashing your son. She kept saying, 'I told you not to make him angry. I told you to be careful.'" I pictured the scene. Ophelia, with her perpetually tight lips and judgmental gaze, scolding my son while he stood with his head down, like a schoolboy who had failed. This picture gave me a grim satisfaction. "Anything else?" I asked. "Yes, a man came in this morning, a lawyer judging by his suit. He stayed with them for about an hour. And then," Walter lowered his voice, as if he was afraid of being overheard, "I saw them taking your things out of the storage room in the garage. Old albums, boxes of papers. They put it all in the trunk of Hamish's car and took it somewhere." This news alarmed me. The garage held family photo albums, old letters, including correspondence with Doreen during my service in Vietnam. What were they going to do with these personal items? Use it as leverage? Or worse, destroy it? I immediately contacted Alistair. They took my personal belongings from the house. Photos, letters, documents. "Is that legal?" "Technically, no," he answered after a short pause. "It's your property, located in your house. They have no right to dispose of it without your consent. We can add that to the lawsuit." On the fifth day after receiving the notice, Hamish left a new message, and his tone changed completely. "Dad, I found your old diaries, the ones you kept after Mom died. Do you really want people to know what you wrote in there? About your dark thoughts? Your plans in case things got too hard? The lawyer said it could be used as evidence of your instability, but I don't want to do that. Give us 3 months instead of 1, and no one will ever see those tapes." Now it was open blackmail. Yes, after Doreen's death, I'd kept a journal, writing down my thoughts and feelings, trying to cope with the grief. There were dark reflections, there were suicidal thoughts. That's true, but it was all in the past. And to use those notes against me was a despicable thing I didn't think my son was capable of. I sent the tape to Alistair with the brief comment, "Now they're trying to blackmail me." His response was immediate. "This is getting way over the line. Blackmail is a criminal offense. I can use this message as evidence in court. But it's up to you," I wondered. Could I take such a step? Bring blackmail charges against my own son? Part of me, still clinging to the remnants of my fatherly feelings, resisted the idea. But the other part, burned by betrayal, demanded retribution. On the 6th day, my neighbor Walter reported that a real estate appraiser had come to the house. They showed him the rooms, discussed something in the garden. The valuer was taking pictures of the house from every angle. It looked like they were going to sell it after all. This was too much. They had no right to sell the house without my consent. Alistair, on hearing this, immediately sent out official warnings to all the major estate agents in the area, informing them that the house was not for sale and that any attempt to sell without my personal presence would be considered fraudulent. On the 7th day, a new voicemail arrived, this time from Ophelia. "Earl, this is Ophelia. I always knew you were a cruel, selfish man, but I never thought you were capable of such meanness to your own son. Verida's pregnant. She's in danger of miscarrying because of all this stress. If anything happens to the baby, it'll be on your head. Come to your senses before it's too late." Her voice sounded contrived, every word calculated to make me feel guilty. But I had long ago figured this woman out. From the beginning, Ophelia had seen me as nothing more than an obstacle to getting free housing. And now that her plan was falling apart, she was trying to manipulate my feelings. The next day, a text came from Walter that made me chuckle. "Earl, you won't believe it. They made such a scene they had to call the police. It started with the old lady blaming your son for ruining everything. She said if he'd done what she told him to do, they'd have taken over the house by now." Then Verida intervened, and the three of them yelled at each other. A neighbor across the street called the police because of the noise. 2 officers came, calmed them down. Then I saw Ophelia leaving the house with a suitcase. Looks like she moved out. So a rift had begun in their little family nest? It was better than I expected. They started blaming each other for the failure of their plan. And from the looks of it, Ophelia had been the master architect of the plot against me all along. That same evening, Alistair called with an update. Their lawyer contacted me. They're willing to agree to the eviction, but they're asking for 60 days instead of 30. They say they need more time to find suitable accommodation, given Verida's condition. "No concessions," I replied firmly. 30 days as stated in the notice. "That's what I'll give," Alistair said, "but I must warn you that they may apply to the court for an adjournment." On the 9th day, Hamish left another message. And now his voice sounded different, tired, depressed. Dad, Ophelia's moved out. She said she's not going to share responsibility for, he stammered, for our mistakes. Verita is inconsolable. We did look into housing options, but everything is too expensive, especially now that we need the extra room for the baby. I'm not asking you to call off the eviction. I'm just asking for a little more time. Please, Dad. I felt a prick of conscience. Maybe I really am being too harsh. Maybe I should give them a little more time. But then I remembered everything I'd been through, how they'd forced me out of my own home for years, how they took away my master bedroom, limited my use of the kitchen and living room, wouldn't let me have a dog, how they said behind my back that I was losing my mind, and finally how they kicked me out, intending to send me to a nursing home against my will. No, they deserved everything they got, and more. On the 10th day, Walter reported that he saw Hamish and Verita start packing. They loaded several boxes into the car. Verita was crying. Hamish looked like he hadn't slept in days. And by the way, I haven't seen Ophelia since that scandal. She hasn't come back. I called Alistair to see if they'd heard from their lawyer. Yes, they've officially given up trying to contest the eviction, he said, but they've filed a motion for an extension of time. The court will consider it in 3 days. Frankly, the chances of the petition being granted are minimal, given that they've had plenty of time to find a new place to live. But the decision rests with the judge. What happens if they don't vacate the house by the deadline? In that case, we'll file an eviction suit. The court will issue a writ to the sheriff, and he will physically remove them from the house if necessary. This prospect did not make me happy. I didn't want my son to be let out of the house in handcuffs, but I also wasn't going to back down. They had to realize that there were consequences to their actions. On the 12th day, the court denied the petition to extend the eviction. They still had 18 days to vacate the house voluntarily. That same evening, a new message came from Hamish. Dad, I've been trying to reach you all day. The court denied our petition. Verita and I found an apartment, but we can't move in until a month from now. We have nowhere to go for those 2 weeks. I understand you're angry, and you have a right to be. What we did, it was wrong. We succumbed to Ophelia's influence. She convinced us that you needed specialized care, but now I see we were wrong. Please give us these 2 weeks. After that, we'll leave and never bother you again, if that's what you want. For the first time, there was real remorse in his voice. He admitted that they were wrong. Part of me wanted to relent, to give them those 2 weeks. But the other part, the tougher and more calculating part, reminded me that any concession now could be seen as weakness. I contacted Alistair to discuss the situation. It's your decision, Earl, he said after listening to the tape. Sarnom, you're not legally obligated to give them extra time. But if you want to be lenient, we can draw up an agreement whereby they recognize all your rights to the house and agree to vacate it by a certain date without further claim. I thought about it. Such an agreement might protect me from further legal maneuvers on their part. But I also knew that any document signed under duress could be challenged later. I'll think about it, I replied. The next day, Walter reported that Hamish and Verita were still packing. He also noticed that they had thrown out several bags of trash, among which were many papers. I'm not sure, but I thought there were some papers, old photos. They are getting rid of things they can't take with them. This news alarmed me. What if my personal belongings were among the trash? Family heirlooms, letters, photographs. I asked Walter to check if that was possible, but he replied that the trash had already been taken away. On the 15th day after the eviction notice, exactly halfway through, something unexpected happened. Alistair called early in the morning, his voice sounding worried. Earl, they tried to sell the house. My informant at the real estate agency said Hamish came by yesterday, claiming to be the sole owner. Claimed he'd gotten the house as a gift from his father years ago, but the deed had been lost in the move. He was looking for a realtor who'd be willing to do the deal without a full set of documents. I felt the blood rush to my face with rage. Even now, when their plan was falling apart, they were still trying to steal my house. That's a felony, Alistair continued. Attempted real estate fraud. We can file a police report. I remained silent, trying to control my anger. File a police report? Get my own son arrested? That would be the ultimate breakup, with no chance of reconciliation. What happens if we just continue the eviction process without going to the police? I finally asked. They would still have to vacate the house within a specified period of time, but they would still get away with attempted fraud. I made the decision not to file a police report yet. It was a card I could play later if the situation escalated. That same day, a new message arrived from Hamish. Dad, we found a temporary place to live. We'll move out within the week without waiting for the deadline. But I want you to know that what you're doing will destroy our family forever. Think about whether you're ready for that. A threat wrapped in a wrapper of humility. He was still trying to manipulate my feelings, to make me feel guilty for defending my legal rights. This only strengthened my resolve. The next day, Walter reported that a furniture moving company's truck had pulled up to the house. Hamish and Verita began loading their belongings. The process was slow, with frequent interruptions for arguments between them. They fight all the time, Walter said. Verita accuses Hamish of ruining everything with his softness. Says that if he had been firmer with you from the beginning, you never would have gotten to this point. I grinned. So Verita had finally shown her true colors. All these years she'd been working through Hamish, taking advantage of his affection for me and his indecisiveness. Now that their plan had failed, she couldn't hide her frustration and anger. On the 18th day, Alistair handed me a new offer from their lawyer. They are ready to vacate the house immediately, provided you let them take all the furniture and appliances, including what was in the house before they arrived. I laughed. They were still trying to get something out of this situation. The furniture in the house was mostly stuff that Doreen and I had bought over the years. Quality, expensive pieces, many of which had sentimental value to me. Absolutely not, I replied. They can only take what they brought themselves. Everything else stays in the house. On the 20th day, Walter reported that Hamish and Verita had removed the last of the boxes. The house seemed empty, but they still hadn't returned the keys. I watched them drive away. Verita was crying. Hamish looked, lost. Like a part of him was still in that house. I felt a prick of conscience. Despite everything that had happened, Hamish was still my son. The house I defended with such fury was his home too, the house where he'd grown up, where his childhood had been. But he had made the choice to let his wife and mother-in-law displace me, and now he was paying for that choice. On the 21st day, 9 days before the eviction deadline, Alistair reported that the keys to the house had been left in his office. They were accompanied by a short note from Hamish. We have vacated the house as you requested. I hope you are satisfied. My men will check the house today, Alistair said. They'll make sure they really moved out and didn't do any damage to the property. Thank you, I said. When can I come back? As soon as we're sure everything's all right. Probably as soon as tomorrow. I hung up the phone and went out onto the veranda of my mountain retreat. It was evening. The sun was coloring the mountains with golden and purple tones. I took a deep breath of fresh air and tried to feel the joy of victory. I had won, got my home back, protected what was rightfully mine. But instead of joy, I felt only fatigue and a strange emptiness. All this confrontation, all this struggle, it had drained me of more strength than I'd expected. And somewhere deep inside was the pain of realizing that I had lost my son. It didn't matter who was to blame. The breakup seemed final. The next day, Alistair called with a report on the state of the house. On the whole, the house is all right, but there are some unpleasant surprises. They seem to have deliberately left a mess in some of the rooms. On the wall in the master bedroom, the one they occupied, there's an inscription in paint that reads, "We hope you're happy in your empty house, old man." Other than that, there's no major damage. What about my personal effects? Photos? Documents? Most of it seems to have disappeared. The cabinets in the study are empty. The living room where the family photos were is now just empty frames. I gritted my teeth. They had taken my memories, my history, probably threw them away, or worse, stored them somewhere, planning to use them against me in the future. I want to go back to the house tomorrow, I decided. I'll get everything in order. Are you sure about that? I could hire a cleaning company? No, I'll do it myself. I wanted to see for myself what they'd done to my house. I wanted to erase their last message, their last attempt to hurt me, and maybe start over, in a house that was mine alone again. That evening, the last message came from Hamish. We moved out like you wanted. I hope you enjoy living alone in this huge empty house. Verda says she wants nothing more to do with you. Yeah, I don't know how I feel. Part of me still hopes you'll come to your senses and realize that family's more important than any house. But the other part of me is just tired of it all. Tired of you, your stubbornness, your inability to forgive and forget. Maybe we're all better off without you. Goodbye, Dad. I listened to that message over and over, trying to catch the sincerity in my son's voice. Was there real regret in it? Or was it just a last-ditch attempt to make me feel guilty? I barely slept that night, pondering the cost of my victory. I had defended my home, my property, my dignity, but I lost my son. Was it a fair exchange? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't do otherwise. I couldn't let them take everything I'd worked for all my life. I couldn't let them treat me like a helpless old man with no say in my own destiny. In the morning, I packed my things, locked up the mountain house, and got in my car. It was time to return to Los Altos, to the home I had reclaimed. What awaited me there? Empty rooms, defiled walls, the absence of things dear to me? Or maybe a chance to start over, on my own terms? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that this was my victory. A bitter victory, but a victory. And I intended to savor it. I returned to my house in Los Altos almost a month after I'd been kicked out. Standing in the driveway, I felt a strange feeling, a mixture of triumph and bitterness. The house looked the same as it had before, but something had subtly changed. Maybe it was the light hitting the windows from a different angle, or maybe it was the air itself. Alistair met me at the entrance with the keys in his hand. "Welcome home, Earl," he said, handing me a bunch. My men checked everything out. There's no structural damage, but he stopped talking, and I realized I was in for some nasty surprises inside. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The first thing that caught my eye was the emptiness. Gone were most of the decorative objects, paintings, framed photographs. The furniture remained, but arranged differently than I remembered. There was a strange odor in the air, a mixture of cleaning products and something else unpleasant. They'd done sort of a final cleanup, Alistair said, following me. But it didn't seem to be for the purpose of leaving the house in good condition. I walked silently into the living room. The sofa and armchairs were still there, but the coffee table I'd handmade for Doreen for their 20th wedding anniversary was gone. So was the collection of crystal figurines she'd collected over the years. The mantelpiece gaped empty where family photos used to stand. "They've taken all the personal effects," Alistair said. "We can sue for the return of the property if you want." I shook my head. Most of these items had value only to me. Sentimental, not tangible. They couldn't be valued in dollars and cents. In the kitchen, the next surprise awaited me. The refrigerator, which had previously been covered with magnets and photos, now bore a note written in Verida's sharp handwriting. "Enjoy being alone, old man." I tore it off and crumpled it up without saying a word. Alistair looked away delicately. The bedroom, my former bedroom that they'd turned into Verida's home office, was almost empty now. Gone was the desk, gone was the bookcase. But on the wall, above where the bed used to be, was a red-painted sign that read, "We hope you're happy in your empty house, old man." "We could hire painters," Alistair said quietly, seeing me frozen in front of it. "They'll paint over the whole thing." "No," I answered. "I'll do it myself, with my own hands." My former guest room, where I'd been forced out over the years, was empty too. The bed was still there, but the small refrigerator I'd bought so I wouldn't have to go to the kitchen. Gone too was the television, the only entertainment during the long evenings of my voluntary confinement. "They left me an empty shell," I said finally, walking around the house. "Took away everything that mattered to me. Can we—" "No," I interrupted Alistair. "I'm not going to chase after pictures and souvenirs. They're just things." But deep down, I knew they weren't just things. They were tangible evidence of my life, my story. Photographs of Doreen that didn't exist anywhere else. Letters we had written to each other during my deployment. Souvenirs from trips we took together. It's all gone now, perhaps forever. "There's something else you should know," Alistair said as we sat down in the kitchen with cups of coffee he had thoughtfully brought with him. They haven't given up trying to contest the eviction. What? But they've moved out. Yes, they physically left the house, but their lawyer filed a new lawsuit claiming the eviction was illegal because you're incapacitated and can't make those decisions. I felt my insides boiling. Are they still trying to make me look crazy? I'm afraid so. Their lawyer has provided the court with some evidence of your instability. Some diaries, letters, neighbors' accounts of strange behavior. What neighbors? I was indignant. Walter certainly wouldn't. Not Walter, Alistair shook his head. The woman across the street, Martha Jenkins. She claims she's seen you talking to yourself in the garden more than once, as if you were arguing with someone. I remembered Martha, a gaunt woman with perpetually pinched lips who seemed only to watch the neighbors from behind the curtains. I did talk out loud sometimes when I was working in the garden, an old habit that had developed after Doreen's death. But it was hardly a sign of insanity. What now? The court has scheduled a hearing in 2 weeks. They want a psychiatric evaluation and the temporary appointment of a guardian to manage your affairs. A guardian? I couldn't believe my ears. They want to take away my right to manage my own assets? That's right, and if they succeed, they can contest the eviction and even move back into the house. I leaned back in my chair, trying to make sense of the new information. It seemed I had won the battle, but not the war. They were still not giving up, still trying to take away the last thing I had left, control over my own life. The next day I decided to visit Walter to see what had been going on in my absence. My old neighbor greeted me with genuine joy. Earl, it's good to see you home. How are you? I've been better, I admitted, sitting down on his porch. Tell me, Walter, have you noticed anything strange lately? What do you mean? About Hamish, Verite, about who they were socializing with, what they were doing before they left. Walter thought for a moment, rubbing his chin. Well, there was this woman, Martha Jenkins. She started dropping in on them a lot after you left. And some man in a suit didn't look like a friend, more like a lawyer or a doctor. Martha? I was surprised. And we'd never been particularly close to her. Yeah, it's weird. They'd sit in the kitchen for hours talking about something. I also saw Hamish taking some papers, boxes of documents out of the house, taking them somewhere. I nodded. It all made sense now. They were looking for any information that might help them prove I was incapacitated. Martha had probably agreed to testify against me, perhaps for money or some other reason. Back at home, I went down to the basement. In the far corner, behind some old boxes of Christmas decorations, was a small safe that only I knew about. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were 4 small devices, wireless microphones that I had installed in different parts of the house, after I realized Hamish, Verita, and Ophelia were up to something. I wasn't paranoid. I just wanted to know what was going on in my own house when I wasn't around. There was a hard drive with recordings lying next to the microphones. I picked it up and went up to the living room, where my old laptop stood, which they thankfully hadn't touched. Plugging in the hard drive, I started going through the files. There were a lot of them, hundreds of hours of records from different rooms of the house. I decided to start with the last month before my exile. The first few recordings didn't contain anything special. The usual household conversations, discussions about shopping, weekend plans. But then I came across a conversation that took place in the kitchen about 2 weeks before the fateful dinner. It's not going to work just like that, Ophelia was saying. We need to act more decisively. This house is worth millions, and it will go to Hamish anyway when the old man dies. But why wait? He's old enough already, and he acts strange sometimes. Mom, I'm not sure, Verita's voice sounded worried. What if he realizes what we're up to? He won't realize anything if we're careful. We need to gradually convince him that he needs help, that he can't live alone. We've already limited his space in the house. Now we need to limit his freedom of action. How? Was Hamish's voice, quiet and unsure. We start with the little things. We'll move things around so he can't find them. We'll say he forgot to take his medication, even if he didn't. Make it seem like his memory is deteriorating. And then we'll suggest he move to a specialized facility for his own good. I turned off the tape, unable to listen any further. Everything fell into place now. They didn't just want me to move out, they planned to strip me of everything. My home, my savings, my freedom, my dignity, all under the guise of looking after my well-being. I called Alistair immediately. "I need you to come over," I said without preamble. "I have something that changes the situation completely." Alistair arrived an hour later. I showed him some key notes. His face grew more serious by the minute. "Earl, this is—" He shook his head, unable to find the words. "This changes everything. With these records, their lawsuit won't just fail. We can counter-sue for attempted fraud, for conspiracy to deprive you of your property. That's a felony." "How legitimate are these records?" I asked. "I made them without their knowledge." "California does require the consent of all parties for audio recordings," Alistair said thoughtfully. "But there are exceptions. For example, if the recording is made to prevent a crime or to gather evidence of criminal conspiracy. In your case, you could argue that you had reason to suspect bad faith and acted in self-defense. So we can use these tapes in court? That's for the judge to decide. But even if the tapes aren't admitted as official evidence, the mere fact that they exist could make a big difference in the case. We can use them as leverage." "How?" "We can contact their lawyer and tell them we have tapes proving conspiracy. Suggest they drop the lawsuit and sign an agreement waiving all claims to the house and your property. In exchange, we will not use those records to press criminal charges." I pondered his proposal. Part of me wanted to go all the way, present the tapes in court, get punishment for all three of them. But the other part, the more practical part, realized that a lengthy trial with an uncertain outcome was not in my best interest. "Let's try your option," I decided. "Contact their lawyer, lay out our terms. But I want them to know I have those tapes. I want them to hear them." The next day, Alistair arranged a meeting with Gerald Price, Hamish and Verita's lawyer. The meeting was to take place in Alistair's office, on neutral ground. I insisted on attending in person. Price appeared to be a lean, middle-aged man with sharp features and a cold stare. He entered the conference room with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning. "Mr. Brody," he nodded at me, then turned to Alistair. "Mr. Pierce said you had some kind of proposal?" "Not just an offer," I answered before Alistair could open his mouth. "We have evidence of a criminal conspiracy to deprive me of my property and liberty." Price raised an eyebrow, showing little concern. "A serious charge." "And what evidence do you have?" I nodded to Alistair, and he turned on one of the recordings, a conversation between Ophelia, Verita, and Hamish in the kitchen, where they were discussing a plan to incapacitate me. As he listened, Price's face changed. Confidence was replaced by surprise, then anxiety. When the tape ended, he coughed, trying to hide his confusion. This tape, if it's authentic, was made without the consent of the participants. That's illegal in California. "That's right," Alistair said calmly. "Unless the recording is made to prevent a crime or to gather evidence of criminal conspiracy." Mr. Brody had every reason to suspect bad faith on the part of his relatives and acted in self-defense. "That still has to be proven in a court of law," Price countered, but his voice was no longer as confident as before. "We're ready for it," I said. "I've got dozens of hours of footage like this, all with dates, times, distinct voices. We'll go to court if we have to, but I'd prefer to settle this peacefully." "What do you suggest?" Price asked after a pause. "A dismissal of all claims against Mr. Brody," Alistair replied. "A written statement from your clients that they waive all claims to Mr. Brody's house and property. In exchange, we won't use those records to press criminal charges." Price hesitated, drumming his fingers on the table. "I need to discuss this with my clients." "You have 24 hours, I said firmly. "After that, we go to the police with the records." He nodded and walked away quickly, clearly disturbed by what he'd heard. The next day, Price called as we'd agreed. His voice sounded tense. "My clients have agreed to your terms. They'll drop the suit and sign a waiver, but they have a counter condition. All copies of the records must be destroyed after the agreement is signed." I looked at Alistair. "We agree to destroy the copies," I said, "but I'll keep the originals, as a guarantee that they won't try to challenge my rights or make me look incompetent again." There was a pause, then Price reluctantly agreed. "All right, we'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow." After his call, I felt the tension of the last few weeks begin to release. They'd given up. They had admitted defeat. My property, my freedom, my dignity. I still had it all. "Congratulations, Earl," Alistair said, shaking my hand. "You've won." I nodded, but I didn't feel very happy. Yes, I had protected what was rightfully mine, but the price had been high. I'd lost my son, and worse, I'd learned that he was willing to betray me for money and a house. There was a tense silence as the documents were signed. Hamish and Verita sat across from me at the long table in Alistair's office, not looking up. Ophelia hadn't shown up. According to Verita, she'd already left for Phoenix to stay with her sister. Better this way, I thought. Meeting this woman might awaken the anger I'd been careful to keep under control. The lawyers exchanged formal phrases, explaining the nature of each document before signing: an agreement to dismiss all litigation, a recognition of my exclusive rights to the house in Los Altos, a waiver of any claim to my property. With each signature, with each stamp placed on the papers, I felt this agonizing phase of my life come to an end. Hamish signed the documents reluctantly, his hand trembling. Verita, on the other hand, acted decisively, her lips tightly pressed together. Her eyes showed not so much sadness as anger, the anger of a losing player who'd put everything on the wrong card. "Are we done?" she asked when the last document was signed. "Yes," Alistair replied. "The agreement is effective immediately. Do you confirm that you have completely vacated Mr. Brody's house and returned all the keys?" "Yes," Hamish nodded. "It's all yours. The house, the keys, everything." I heard the bitterness in his voice, but I didn't feel any pity. Not after what I'd learned from the records. Not after their attempts to declare me incompetent, to deprive me of my liberty and property. "Then our meeting is over," Alistair said, gathering up the papers. "Mr. and Mrs. Brody, your lawyer will get copies of all the documents." They stood up, ready to leave. I stood up too. It was a moment I'd thought about many times in recent weeks. The moment of finally saying goodbye to my son. What do I have to say? What do I feel? "Hamish," I called out as they were already heading for the door. My son turned around. His eyes were a mixture of emotions: shame, regret, and deep-seated resentment. "I hope you realize what you've done," I said quietly. "And I hope that someday you'll understand why I couldn't do otherwise." He looked at me with a long gaze, and for a moment I thought I saw something of the old Hamish in him. That boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle. That young man I'd sent off to college. "Goodbye, Dad," he said at last and walked out without looking back. Verita followed him without a word. The door closed and there was silence. "Are you all right?" Alistair asked after a while. "Yes," I answered, though it wasn't entirely true. "I just wanted this to be over." "It's over now," he assured me. "Legally, you're completely protected. They won't be able to challenge those documents without risking criminal prosecution." I nodded, grateful for his work and support. "I'm going to head back to the house, need to assess what's left of it. Do you want me to come with you?" No thanks. I'll have to do this on my own." The drive home took less than half an hour, but it felt like an eternity. Every traffic light, every turn brought me closer to a place that had once been the center of my world, but was now a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of family relationships. By the time I pulled up to the house, it was starting to get dark. I sat in the car for a few minutes, looking at the facade. From the outside, it looked the same as it always did. Well-tended garden, trimmed bushes, freshly painted front door. Nothing spoke of the drama playing out behind those walls. Finally, I pulled myself together and got out of the car. The key turned easily in the lock, so they hadn't changed the locks as I'd feared. A small favor, but I was grateful for it. Once inside, I turned on the light and froze on the threshold. Emptiness. Not just a lack of things, but some deep, emotional emptiness, as if the house had lost its soul. The walls that had seen the happy years with Doreen, that had witnessed Hamish's growing up, now seemed lifeless. I walked slowly through the hallway into the living room. The furniture was mostly still there. The couch, the chairs, the coffee table. But gone were all the personal items. Photos, books, decorative objects that made the house seem alive. There were gaping voids on the shelves, light rectangles on the walls where paintings used to hang. The kitchen was in perfect order. Too perfect, as if no one had ever cooked, eaten, or lived here. The refrigerator was empty and off. The cabinets contained only the most basic utensils: A few plates, cups, cutlery. Everything else was gone. I went up to the second floor, to the bedroom that had once belonged to Doreen and me and had been turned into Verida's home office. The room was completely empty. Even the curtains had been removed from the windows. I noticed a faint stain on one of the walls. It looked like they'd painted over the offensive writing they'd left earlier. A small concession to decency. Hamish and Verida's room was empty too, with only the mattress left on the bed. Ophelia's former room had bare walls and dust in the corners. I went back downstairs and sat in a chair in the living room. The house I'd lived in most of my life now seemed foreign. Or maybe it was me who had become a stranger to it. I remembered how Doreen and I had moved in as a young couple, full of hope and plans. How excited we were when Hamish was born. How we'd made every corner of the house cozy and homey. And now I sat alone in an empty house, having won the battle but lost what really mattered. Family. Was this victory worth it? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't let them take away my dignity, my freedom, the fruits of my life. I spent the night in the house, sleeping on the couch in the living room, not wanting to go up to the empty bedrooms. In the morning, I started making a list of things to do. Buy new curtains, replace some furniture, maybe repaint the walls. But his heart didn't lie with those plans. The house needed more than just new things. It needed new life, new energy, and I wasn't sure I could give it to it. For the next week, I lived between two houses, the city house in Los Altos and the mountain retreat, gradually moving the rest of my belongings, archives, tools. I took my time, giving myself time to think about what to do next. Alistair came to visit at the end of the week, bringing a bottle of good whiskey. "How are you?" he asked me as we sat on the veranda with glasses. "Honestly, I don't know," I replied. "The house is mine now, without any doubts or threats. But it feels empty, not just because of the lack of things, a lack of meaning." Alistair nodded understandingly. "Have you thought about selling it?" "I have," I admitted. "But I keep thinking it would be a betrayal of Doreen's memory. We've invested so much in this house. Doreen lived in this house, but the house is not Doreen," Alistair said softly. "Her memory is in you, not in the walls and floors." I was silent, pondering his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe holding on to the house was a form of sentimentality I couldn't afford after everything that had happened. "How much could it be worth now?" I finally asked. "Considering the real estate market in Los Altos, I'd say about $3.5 million. Maybe more if you do a little remodeling before you sell it." That didn't sound realistic. When Doreen and I bought this house, it was under $300,000. The real estate market in Silicon Valley had skyrocketed over the decades. "I'll think about it," I said. 2 weeks passed. I was slowly getting the house in order, but I was becoming more and more convinced that I didn't want to live there. Too many painful memories. Too many ghosts. Every time I passed the stairs, I heard Hamish's footsteps running down the stairs as a child. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I saw Doreen preparing Sunday dinner. And now the dark ghosts were added to those light ghosts, Verita whispering something in Hamish's ear, Ophelia watching me with an appraising gaze. At the end of the month, I made a decision. I called Alistair and told him I wanted to sell the house. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Absolutely. There's no point in holding on to a place that no longer brings you joy. I'll put you in touch with a good realtor." "But what will you do? Where will you move?" "I have a place," I replied, thinking of my mountain retreat. "A home that no one knows about. No one but you now." The sale of the house went quicker than I expected. A young couple from a technology company, both engineers, bought it with virtually no haggling, paying even more than we had originally asked. Apparently, they liked the location and the school district. They had a young child and a second on the way. The house my family was building would now be home to a new family. There was some justice in that, a sort of continuation of life. On the day the deal closed, I walked around the empty rooms one last time, saying goodbye to every corner, every memory. In the master bedroom, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the garden that had once been Doreen's pride. In Hamish's room, I ran my hand along the wall, where the shelf with his childhood trophies used to hang. In the kitchen, I stood at the stove, remembering Sunday breakfasts and family dinners. "Goodbye," I said quietly, closing the front door for the last time. The money from the sale of the house had added a lot to my already small savings. Now I could live comfortably for the rest of my life, even if I decided to buy a new house every year. But I didn't need new houses. I needed peace. I moved into the mountain house for good. The first weeks were strange. After the hustle and bustle of the city, the silence seemed deafening. But gradually I got used to it. I organized my life, set up a vegetable garden, had a few chickens. In the mornings I worked in the garden. During the day I read or did minor repairs. And in the evenings I sat on the veranda with a glass of whiskey, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. 3 months passed. I had almost no contact with the outside world, only called occasionally with Alistair on business matters and with Walter to find out news. There was no news from Hamish, and I didn't look for it. But one day Walter called himself, his voice sounding excited. "Earl, you won't believe this." I happened to meet Martha Jenkins at the supermarket, and she said she got a letter from Verita. So? I tried to sound indifferent, although my heart was suddenly racing. They moved to Oregon. Verita got a job at some firm there, and Hamish got a job as an engineer. And she wrote that Ophelia was living with them now, like she was having some kind of health problems. I was quiet for a moment, digesting the information. Oregon, another state, far enough away to start a new life, and Ophelia's with them. So this triumvirate hadn't broken up, despite the failure of their plan. "Thank you, Walter," I said finally. "It's good to know they're doing okay." Martha also told me that Verita's pregnant. "So you're going to be a grandfather soon, Earl." That news hit harder than I expected. A baby, my grandson or granddaughter. A baby I'll probably never see. "That's interesting," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After talking to Walter, I sat on the veranda for a long time, looking out at the sunset and thinking about the news. Part of me felt the pain of knowing that I would be deprived of the opportunity to know my grandson. Another part was anxious. The child would grow up under the influence of Verita and Ophelia, women who didn't stop at deception and manipulation to achieve their goals. What kind of person would he grow up in such an environment? But what surprised me most of all was that I didn't feel a keen desire to reestablish contact with Hamish, despite the news of a future grandchild. The wound of betrayal was too deep. Perhaps it would heal with time, but now the thought of reconciliation seemed impossible. I stood up, stretched, and decided to walk around the house before going to bed. The night air was fresh and scented with pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. I stopped, looking up at the starry sky, and suddenly felt a strange calmness. I had won my war, protected what was rightfully mine. I'd lost my son, but I'd kept my dignity. And now I had a chance to live the rest of my life on my own terms, at peace with myself. As I walked back to the house, I thought that tomorrow I should go to the nearest town and buy a puppy. I had always wanted a dog, and now that no one could forbid me, why not? It was time to create a new life, new memories, without looking back at the past, without waiting for an impossible reconciliation. That night I slept soundly, without dreams. And in the morning I woke up feeling that I was finally free. Free from a home that had become a cage. Free from a family that had become a burden. Free to live my remaining years the way I want, not the way others expect me to. I brewed some coffee, stepped out onto the veranda, and breathed deeply of the fresh mountain air. A new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not the bitterness of victory, but its sweetness.